What's up, guys? Mr. Patterson here with another video for IB Math AASL. Continuing in our core book, chapter 11, section B, we're talking about sampling methods here. So in the previous section, we talked about bias or errors when we were selecting our sample. In this section, we're talking specifically what are the different kinds of sampling method that we could use. And there are 5 that we're going to talk about. It doesn't mean that there are only 5, but these are the 5 that are considered to be part of the IB curriculum, and therefore they're the ones we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about simple random sampling, which is considered the best because it is the most random, but not necessarily the most practical method for selecting a sample. We're going to talk about stratified sampling, systematic sampling, quota sampling, and convenience sampling. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll be able to, 1, identify sampling methods in a particular problem, but also 2, come up with an explanation for how you would do one of these sampling methods for your particular problem. Let's talk about simple random samples. It says, suppose 3 students are to be sampled from a class of 30. The names of all the students are placed into a barrel. We'd probably reuse a hat, right? And the 3 names are drawn from the barrel. So each student has an equal chance of being selected because there are 3 names chosen, and they're out of 30. Each student has a 1/10 chance of being selected. Each set of 3 students is just as likely to be selected as any other. So that's what happens when we talk about simple random sample. Every individual and every subgroup has an equal chance of being selected. So we can do it by choosing names out of a hat. Or instead, we could use a calculator function called randint. That's not something that we'll necessarily use in our class moving forward, but it is something that is there for you. If you were to go into the math menu and then go over to the probability tab, we would see randint right there. And you would enter in your lower value, like you see here, they entered in the number 1. The upper value, they entered in 30. And then how many numbers do you actually want? And that's why they chose 3 there. All right. The next type of sample we're going to talk about is systematic sampling. Systematic sampling is you have a system for how you're choosing your selection. So in this particular example, they say they're going to take every 10th file starting at number 3. All right. You could take every 5th. You could take every 20th, whatever number it is that you want for your particular sampling method. And then you're going to take every whatever number that was. Let's take a look at an example here. It says management of a large city store wishes to find out whether potential customers like the look of a new product. They decide to sample 5% of the customers using a systematic sample. Show how you could do this. So if we're looking at a situation where we see that 5% is what we want, well, what is 5% as a fraction? It's 5 out of 100 or 1/20th. So therefore, they're going to sample every 20th customer. Now, they're not going to start with the first and then the 21st and then the 41st, etc. They're going to pick a number to start with there. And they used randint in order to find the number they're going to start with. Randint 1 to 20 and then number 1 because we want 1 number in our sample. They're going to start at the 7th person. Then they're going to do the 7th person, the 27th person, the 47th, the 67th, and so on, because they're taking 20 more each time. Therefore, they're selecting 1 out of every 20 people. Let's talk about convenience sampling. First of all, know that convenience sampling is very bad because you're not selecting a random sample. It is not going to be representative of the population. Instead, you're just picking people who are close to you, who are easy to get information from. And that's not good. That's going to have a lot of bias there. Stratified sampling. Stratified sampling is a pretty good and pretty practical way to get a random sample that might be a little bit easier than doing a simple random sample. The general idea is that we have strata or groups and that we are going to take a sample from each group. Now, if what we're taking is a random sample, then that's going to be stratified random sampling. If instead we're just taking a 5 from each group or 10 from each group and not using random sampling, that's referred to as quota sampling. Now, if you see here, they're using year 8s, year 9s, etc. up to year 12. So it's kind of like they're using 8th grade through 12th grade as their strata, as their groups, and then they're taking a representative sample from each group there. Kind of like if we were to take freshmen and then sophomores, juniors, and seniors and separate it there, and then take a random sample from that. Or, since we have a district with 6 schools, we could take a random sample from Freehold Township High School, a random sample from Howell High School, etc. on out there. And like I said, if we are doing it using random sampling, then it's referred to as stratified random sampling. Otherwise, it's quota sampling. Let's take a look at this example here, example number 2. It says in our school, there are 137 students in year 8, 152 in year 9, 174 in year 10, 168 in 11, and 121 in year 12. A sample of 50 students is needed. How many should you randomly select from each year? So what we want to do is we want to figure out proportionally what number should we have from each group. So if you added up all the students, that gives us 752 students. So how many should we take from the year 8s? 137 out of 752 times n, 50, gives us about 9. About 10 from year 9, about 12 from year 10, etc. on out there. So basically all we're doing is we're taking a proportion of each group there to allow us to make sure that our sample is representative of the population. Now it's possible that when we add all these numbers up, sometimes we don't get exactly 50 because of rounding error. That's going to happen from time to time. Don't get too worried if that happens in your particular situation. All right. So that's it for this lesson here on section 11B from the core book. And I'd like you guys to work on page 287, numbers 1 through 9 odd. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you guys soon.